Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Daily Check-In. This is for May 27th, 2020, and I'm Ned Bellavance, Ned1313 on Twitter. And today's topic is interesting. It is how the hardcore scene helped me in my technology career. And that's not an obvious through line, so I will explain that in more detail. It's less of a how-to and more of my personal experience and how if you have similar personal experiences or things that you think are not related to your tech career, how they can actually greatly influence how successful you are. So that's what I want to talk about today. First, I have a few housekeeping things I want to take care of. Number one, woot woot. I got an email today. I am officially a HashiCorp ambassador for 2020. This is the inaugural year of their program. It's basically like the Microsoft MVP, VMware vExpert, community hero kind of thing, but for HashiCorp. And obviously, since I talk a lot about Terraform and I've done stuff for Vault, I guess they thought I had crossed whatever that threshold is, and I'm helping out the community. And I hope that's the case. I hope that I'm providing interesting and useful information to you through things like Terraform Tuesday, the study guides, and the other things that I've put out there. So that's one thing. I'm pretty excited about that. It kind of made my day. The other thing is this Friday is Ask Me Anything Friday. So if you have questions for me, I already have a few in the queue, but I've got time for some more. So hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on LinkedIn. Let me know what you want to know about me or really anything else. It's Ask Me Anything, right? That's the whole point. So with those two things out of the way, just want to check in with you. I mean, obviously, I'm having a pretty good day. How's your day going? You feeling all right? It's Wednesday. It's kind of the middle of the week. Can be a bit of a lull, but I know you're going to get through it. If you're in the US, it's kind of a short week, which is nice. And we're all looking forward to the weekend and summer starting to roll in and things warming up and hopefully things loosening up. So I hope you're doing okay and just, keep trucking on and we'll get through this together. Now, the topic of today is how the hardcore scene helped my career. And what spawned this was actually two things. The first one is I've been watching a lot of Finn McKenty's Punk Rock MBA on YouTube, and I really enjoy his perspective and the way that he focuses on the business of music, in addition to all the other interesting things that go on in the heavy metal, hardcore, all those kinds of heavier music genres. And it got me thinking about my own experience because in high school and in college, I was in a number of metal and hardcore bands. And I also was friends with people who were in bands and just kind of involved in the scene. And that did sort of shape some things for me that I didn't realize at the time were going to be super useful in other aspects of my career. So that was one thing that sort of spawned this. The other thing is, and this is totally random, one of those bands that I was in, and we're talking 1998 here, my fellow bandmate got a physical letter from someone with $5 in it saying, hey, I have the original demo tape from 98 and it is not doing so hot. Do you by any chance have any CDs you could burn of this recording? Send it to me. I really appreciate it. Here's $5 to cover the cost. And we're like, what? That was over 20 years ago, and this person is finally wearing out that tape and they want to get like a digital copy of it. So my friend is going to burn one and send it to him, but that just sort of gives you an idea of the long tail of the content that you put out there and how someone can find something useful and interesting that you created almost 20 years ago. That's just mind-blowing. So with that in mind, how did this influence my current career? There's a couple different aspects. Being in a band is a little bit like running a business. So helping and also helping bands is a bit like a business. So for instance, bands, and I'm talking back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, you had to build a website and you didn't get to use something like Squarespace or put your stuff on Facebook. You actually had to build out a website for the band, which meant writing it probably in HTML without the benefit of some of the more modern products out there. So you had to learn a little bit about technology. It also meant creating merchandise. So you had to create things like shirts and stickers and tape inserts for your tapes. So that either you had to do that yourself or find other freelancers who were willing to do that. And then there were other things like recording your music and getting it promoted. You had to book shows so you could play out in different venues. You had to plan out tours. So there was a whole logistical aspect of being in a band. And then there was the whole merchandise aspect. You had to purchase merchandise that you were going to sell and then determine what price to sell that merchandise at. Because if you set the cost too high, no one was going to buy your merch and you wouldn't make any money. You'd end up with a bunch of stock that you can't sell. If you went too low, then you wouldn't clear the marginal cost of creating that merch. And that's really how most bands made their money, and I think still make their money, is off the merchandise they sell at shows and online. It's not so much the shows themselves, because you don't get that much of a take at the door, especially when you're a smaller band. But all of that is basically running a business. So you compare all of those different aspects of being in a band or helping other bands. That's all stuff I was doing in my late teens and early 20s. And what it did is it gave me a few different skills that I found extremely useful as I moved into my IT career. One of those is being a self-starter. No one's going to make your band famous. No one's going to make it successful except for you and your other bandmates. So you have to be a self-starter. There's no boss standing over your shoulder asking you when the TPS reports are going to get done. If you don't create a new album, if you don't go out and tour, if you don't do those things, nothing happens. So you have to be a self-starter. And being in bands and helping other bands taught me about being a self-starter, just going out and doing the thing. And I have a whole video on doing the thing, so that probably shouldn't be surprising. The second thing is that it gave me this DIY ethos. I was not going to pay someone to create something that I could create myself. So I forced myself to learn enough to build a website. And granted, these were not great websites. I am very fortunate that none of them exist on the web anymore, but it taught me how to build a website. And that is a skill that is still relevant and useful. I don't have to, handcraft it in HTML anymore, but just having that basic understanding of the technology was useful. I also learned about basic design and creating merchandise. And still, I'm not great at it. I'll never be a graphic designer, but I learned enough to make my own stickers. I learned enough to make my own shirts. Those are the sort of things that are not directly transferable. No one's asking me as an IT person to make them t-shirts, or at least not usually. But that DIY ethos is really useful when you are trying to learn about technology. Just relying on vendors to spoon feed you the technology is not a great way to become better at technology. It's that DIY, I'm going to try it out myself. Also, when you're in a career and you want to advance in that career, the best way to do that is to put your hand up and volunteer for things. And that's that self-starter. It's not what your boss is asking you to do. It's what your boss should be asking you to do. And knowing how to stand up and ask for that, being a self-starter kind of gave that to me. Other things, content creation. I mean, being in a band is basically creating content of one kind or another, whether it's music videos, or the merchandise to go along with it. So I got very comfortable with the idea of content creation and putting myself out there. And sometimes people are not super kind about the stuff that you put out there. It's not always going to be positive feedback, and that's okay. You can learn from that feedback. Some of it you can dismiss because it's useless. Some of it is constructive feedback that you can use to become a better band, to create better music videos, or to build a better course for Pluralsight, or improve your YouTube channel or your podcast. So all of that content creation that I did taught me some tools that I use today. I still use Audacity all the time. It also just taught me a way of thinking about how I'm going to create and disseminate my content. It also got me very comfortable in front of a mic, if I'm being honest. The bands that I was in, I'm not the greatest at playing instruments. I mean, I have a guitar back there, but I don't play that guitar very often, and I certainly wouldn't play it in public. I was the front man, and that probably isn't surprising if you're watching this video, but I was the front man in these bands, and I would get up there and I would talk to the audience and I would scream my heart out because I didn't really sing. Not a great singer either, but that's what I would do. And so that got me very comfortable as being a presenter, being in front of a mic, getting up in front of large crowds. And I still get, the nervous, I get the butterflies when I'm doing it, but it gave me ways to cope with that nervousness, and knowing that once you get into it, once you've started down that path, you're going to be fine. It also gave me the skills to deal with vendors and freelancers, because Sometimes they're not going to be the greatest to work with, and you need to be able to find vendors and freelancers you trust and invest in them and know when to break off a relationship. Another thing that being in a band is all about is it's kind of like being on a small product team where your product is the band. And because of that, you learn skills like conflict resolution. There's going to be conflict in your band. You need to learn how to deal with that or break up. Sometimes bands break up and that's fine, but the ones that make it, the ones that, get past that first battle of the bands, they're the ones who understand conflict resolution, how to make compromises, and how to work together to collaboratively to build out a project. Those are the ones who end up being successful. And those are skills that are super useful in real life. Now, you can't get in a time machine, go back and join me in the hardcore scene. That's probably not a viable option. But what are some takeaways that you can have from this episode? I think the most important thing is that you're going to gain skills from unexpected places. I didn't think when I was doing all of this that it would somehow influence my IT career 20 years later, but it did. And what was important is that I was able to make that connection between things that I enjoyed then and abstracting them into things that I enjoy now. So that's very important. I'd say, if anything, you have to be open to new experiences, try out new things. And while you don't always want to make your hobby a job and a career, because that's not always a great thing, a hobby should be a hobby. I have a whole video about that. The skills that you gain from that hobby can be applicable to your career and growing your career and developing it. So those are my thoughts. I just thought it was an interesting backstory on how I got where I am and some of the things that served me. If you're looking for the music, well, you hear some of it in the intro if you've been listening to the podcast. I can also provide a link to at least one of the bands that I was in if you're interested in hardcore and metal. If you're not, maybe just skip that. But that's all I got for today. Until tomorrow, stay healthy and stay safe, everybody.